Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we are returning to Grand Tactician, the Civil War. We are live streaming this game on August 19th. It's going to be going up on YouTube on August 20th. We are less than 48 hours away from the game going on sale in early access on Steam. It goes on sale on the 21st. Not sure exactly what time on the 21st, but we're closing in. There have been a couple of big patches that have come out in the last few days. I think 2 or 3 days ago there was the really big one they were talking about in terms of some pretty substantial improvements, and then today I noticed there was another patch, I think a smaller one, that came out as well. And so some of the new things that the new patches have added, in addition to bug fixes and enhancements and things like that, they've actually added a new historical battle, the Battle of the Wilderness, which I'm excited to see. Although I do question some of the Union experience numbers here. It has A.P. Hill as more experience than James Longstreet, which I think that's problematic. I don't think that's true. Which was interesting. And then it also had Philip. Oh, I guess Philip Sheridan and Hancock being the same is probably okay. But Burnside isn't inexperienced. He's just bad. He has a lot of experience. He's just bad. So I wonder what these stars really represent. In any event, that's not what we're going to be playing here today. We will probably go back and play the Battle of the Wilderness later. But today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be playing a new campaign, and something you may have noticed as well as another big enhancement that they added, or new piece that they added, is the Summer of 1863 campaign. So previously they had the 1861 and the 1862 campaign, but now they allow you to play the game starting in the summer or spring of 1863, just after the Battle of Chancellorsville. So the Union Army of the Potomac under Joseph Hooker has just been defeated. Grant is closing in on Vicksburg, planning to finish the coup de grace. Meanwhile, the Army of Northern Virginia is getting ready to lead its most famed invasion of the North to Gettysburg. And you can see here the size of the armies. The Confederacy probably at this point will never be stronger again. This is sort of the high watermark. Although I think the Army of the Northern Virginia, in any event, certainly had more men in service in the Spring Peninsula campaign of 62. By 63, this is sort of the high watermark of the Confederacy's capabilities in the East. You have the Army of Northern Virginia coming to its largest size since the Peninsula Campaign. It probably would have actually been slightly larger than the Peninsula Campaign force if they had a division or a couple. There were a couple of divisions. I think there were like 11,000 men under D.H. Hill who were kept south, 2 divisions or so that were kept south out of the campaign. And if you had included those, as well as some other auxiliary forces that were in the Peninsula Campaign because it was being fought around Richmond, then that would have been the strongest the Army of Northern Virginia ever would have been. Really was in the summer of 1863. But in the West, things are much more dire. Tennessee is pretty much all gone, and Vicksburg is almost lost. The Mississippi is almost lost. New Orleans is already taken, and so this is going to be a very challenging starting point for the Confederacy. But I think it's a pretty interesting one too, because this is sort of before the Confederacy really starts to degrade in terms of their military fighting capabilities, at least on the battlefield. Their economy is already in serious trouble. This period of time is going to be very interesting from a campaign perspective. So I am going to go ahead and jump in, and we are going to play the 1863 campaign. We are going to play as the Confederacy, which gives us the historical policies of the Old Dominion, which is kind of irrelevant by this point. So like this might be one of those times where if you're playing the 63 campaign, maybe you want to undo the historical policies, because there's no real value to having the Old Dominion. This is really about the 1861 campaign of bringing Virginia into the war on the side of the Confederacy. I'd rather use this on, some of the other potential pieces that might be more beneficial later in the war, but we'll just keep it to history in any event. We'll keep the Union at the normal 1x aggressiveness, and we won't give the Union any bonuses. They have about 145,000 more men than we do. They have 360 ships. The blockade is well underway, strangling the South, and that's where we're at here. We do have the advantage in morale and experience just coming off the Battle of Chancellorsville. But let's go ahead and let's jump in and see what the 1863 campaign is like, and see if we can't maybe defeat the Army of the Potomac in detail or something along those lines. All right, let's go ahead and see here. Bloodiest war in America. Casualties mounting. Grant to Vicksburg. Lee wins the Battle of Chancellorsville. The siege of Suffolk is lifted. And a war so terrible. Those are the newspaper articles here. So as a reminder, as we're getting into this campaign, we are playing as the South. We're playing the 1863 campaign, which I don't know how well done it is yet. It only just recently released early access. It is May 10th of 1863. We are going to go ahead and pause here. If we zoom in here, we can see that it's interesting that the state of Tennessee is still marked as red because lull. But if we zoom in here, if the game lets me, the game is always very finicky about that. Okay, here we go. If we zoom in here, we can see Virginia is a battlefield. We've just won the Battle of Chancellorsville. The Army of Northern Virginia is encamped down here. Meanwhile, the Union Army of the Potomac is just north of, what river is this? Is this the Rapidan? Up here, you've got the 5th Corps, the 11th Corps, the 12th Corps. So the Union Army is sort of all camped out here in Northern Virginia. The Army of Northern Virginia, just south of there. You can see Robert E. Lee, commanding the Army of Northern Virginia, has about 67,000 soldiers under his command. They're a little bit spread out as well. You've got the 1st Corps under James Longstreet, Old Pete, here with about 20,000 men. You've got the 2nd Corps down south here a little bit to the southwest under Richard Ewell's command. And then you have the Cavalry Division under Jeb Stuart with about 6,200 men, and the 3rd Corps off here on the right under General Ambrose Hill over here to the right of about 21,000 men. All told, about 67,000, mostly infantry. It looks like 21, 20, 19. So 60 there, and then you've got the 6,200 cavalry. Additionally, other units that are available to the Confederacy in the Virginia Theater, there's a detachment in Richmond under Arnold Elzey of 4,600 men. That acts as a deterrent to the 7th Corps down here on the peninsula under the Union Army. You also have the Department of North Carolina here, 11,000 men under Major General Daniel Hill. Daniel Harvey Hill was a very good general, at least he seems to me. I'm not a military historian, but he seemed to have a very good record in 1862, but had a bit of a falling out with, was it Jackson first, and then eventually Lee. But in any event, he was sidelined and was not part of the Army of Northern Virginia's campaign into the North. It makes some sense here, though, just because you probably want to keep some troops shielding Richmond, especially when you've got Peck's command over here near Norfolk, Virginia, which is sort of on the flank to Petersburg and to Richmond. You don't want to leave yourself an enemy corps or whatnot in the rear. Meanwhile, the enemy also has troops in North Carolina, and we don't really have a lot of troops doing anything about it. They've got some troops here in sort of along the coast of North Carolina. I think we have a garrison of troops at Wilmington, or we should have a garrison in this fort here near Wilmington. I don't see one, but we should. And then you've got some garrisons and forces down here near Charleston, South Carolina. You've got a Union Corps ashore. The 10th Corps is ashore down here. And we've got some 15,000 men under PGT Beauregard to the south near Charleston in the event that the North tries to push inland. So you've got a bunch of small little forces here, the District of Columbia or District of Georgia near Savannah, a bunch of small little forces that are shielding the South from invasion all along the coast. So Scott's Great Snake, the Anaconda, is a serious threat at this point in time. And then as we move west here along the coast, we have an army of eastern Louisiana, about 6,800 men, just north of Baton Rouge, which I think the Confederacy retook somewhat recently in this time period from the Union. And then you've got the army in and around Vicksburg, which I believe is the Army of Mississippi, about 30,000 men under General John C. Pemberton, as well as some reserves to the east here under the Department of the West. These guys are not attached to the 30,000 troops under Pemberton. You've got about 8,000 men under Joseph E. Johnston to the east here. Meanwhile, Grant is ashore south of Vicksburg, so he's made his crossing past Vicksburg with his squadron. You can see the Army of Tennessee under Grant. It claims 75,000 men. They do look a little bit strung out. You've got a corps here, you've got a corps here, and a corps here. So we've got 3 different corps. Potentially, we could defeat them in detail if we could concentrate our own forces and bring them to bear against the federal troops. We could bring about 40,000 men between Johnston and Pemberton together, which might allow us to smash the first third or maybe even 2/3 of Grant's army, although it would be a little bit dicey to try and engage the entire force under Grant. And then we could bring some of these reserves here down at Baton Rouge north as well. So if we could bring the 6,800 men north, in addition to the just shy of 40,000 men, we could have about 45,000 men all told to try and strike at Grant. Additionally, there is another Confederate army somewhere around here in southern Tennessee under the Army of Tennessee over here, under General Braxton Bragg, 45,000 men. You can see here that Hardee, Polk, Van Dorn are all attached to that army. Forrest is also attached to that army. I'm still not very good at moving corps and other units in sync. But it might also not be... Oh, Wheeler's Cavalry Corps is also over here. So it might not be a terrible idea to see if we can't bring these troops together to try and engage what I'm assuming it's William Rosecrans' army somewhere. Where are they? There's 3 corps up front here. The Army of... no, it's Cavalry Corps, Reserve Corps. Where is the Army of Tennessee? The Army of the Cumberland, about 60,000 men. So yeah, I mean, Bragg could move aggressively as well against these Federals. And then in eastern Tennessee, we still hold Knoxville, and we have a force of about 15,000 men under Simon Bolivar Buckner, which could also move west. Actually, if Buckner's command moves west and links up with Bragg, we'd have about 60,000 men. That's near even. I mean, we'd be down a little bit, but that's near even odds. Maybe we should consider doing that. Yeah, but I think the Super Chacho, the important thing is to perhaps engage Grant in detail if we can. If we can't knock one corps on the head, followed by the next corps. So I think the first thing I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to use the gaps here in the south, in the southern end of the valley, and we are going to launch a flanking maneuver on the Army of the Potomac. We're going to move up through Winchester, and we're going to see if we can't defeat the force in the valley, because there's a corps here in the valley, and then see what the Federals do. If they give chase, we may go right into the north and launch a invasion of the north, or we may not, but we'll see. So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to take the cavalry division here under Stuart, and I'm going to go ahead and move them. Can I move them to Staunton first? And then up here, does it chain maneuver commands? It does. So move the cavalry corps up through the southern end of the valley. We'll move the 2nd Corps under Ewell. Up toward Winchester. And then we'll move Longstreet's 1st Corps, which I believe this will mirror closely the Confederate maneuver to start the Gettysburg campaign, although perhaps a little bit early. Meanwhile, the 3rd Corps under Hill will screen for a time, I think. You know what? No, we'll move this way, then we'll move this way. Move up toward Winchester. We'll keep the other forces in Richmond in place, so we are going to launch this offensive now. Additionally, I am also going to launch an offensive in Tennessee. So there are Federal troops in Kentucky that could come down to eastern Tennessee, but there are 2 corps that are kind of north here, and they don't seem to be super close to Knoxville. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring the Army of East Tennessee down here toward where Wheeler's Corps is. And then once they arrive, we're going to move Bragg's forces forward as well. This is going to be our grand offensive across the entire front. We're not going to shift troops. We're not going to do much of any of that. We're just going to see if we can't crush the Federals as they come up. The Vicksburg garrison of 10,000 men. Do we leave Vicksburg ungarrisoned? It feels silly. Let's use the Army of Eastern Louisiana to come north here. They're going to threaten Grant's army from the south. Meanwhile, the Army of Mississippi, I'm assuming there's about 10,000 men directly with, or 20,000 men directly with Pemberton. Actually, you know what? Screw that. Let's get into the Army organization. The Trans-Mississippi, Eastern Louisiana. So if we really have so many troops that we can raise in Louisiana, we should raise some new troops. So we've got about 5,000 volunteers that we can recruit. We're just going to do generic infantry. I don't really care what they look like. So we'll go ahead and do generic infantry, Long's brigade, so new brigade there. It doesn't look like I can add new corps or anything like that to these guys, though, which is weird. Is this general limited in terms of what he can do? I can replace him. William Pendleton, Charles Field, Isaiah. We should give Trimble a command rather than have him be stuck in Gettysburg doing nothing but yelling at Ewell. So if we assign him as the new commander, yeah, that's how I do it. So I drag a brigade here. And then I can add a new subunit. Or I guess it's going to take a day, probably. In any event, let's go ahead and raise some more Louisiana troops. These guys are going to have to be, I think, they can't be recruits. You need 3,000, so they're going to have to be draftees. So we're going to raise a brigade of draftees and a brigade of volunteers to the Army of Eastern Louisiana. So we'll get 6,000 more troops that way. It is going to take a couple of days. It looks like the draftees raise almost immediately, which is interesting. Although why their strength is only 1,800. Those are 3. Those are 3. Okay, so those are new units. All right, let's unpause here for a second. Let's exit here. So click, all right, we'll try one more thing, then we'll just go. So let's go back. Because, I mean, ideally, I want to get rid of Pemberton. Pemberton is a piece of crap. And Johnston is a hero. So we want the Army of Mississippi to fight under Johnston. At least in the Confederate eyes, he's a hero. So if we go with transfer, Army of Mississippi, we'll go to the Army Department of the West. And if we click Brigade Commander and we put him down here. Okay, so that does allow me to put a unit under him. But it doesn't give me the option to add new divisions, which I don't understand. I could just stick the whole force under Johnson with no divisions. That doesn't seem very efficient, though. I guess the flip side is I could just assign Johnson's troops under Pemberton and then eliminate the Department of the West and then put Johnson in command. I suppose that's an option. Okay, there's 4 brigades here. We need to put some artillery here. 2 brigades here, so we should add a 3rd. Three brigades of infantry here. Or no, that's actually 4 brigades. 4 brigades of infantry here, 4 brigades of infantry here. All right, so 2 of artillery. 3 and 1, 2 and 1, 4 and 1. Artillery there. And artillery here. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and do this. Johnson's Department of the West. Go ahead and unpause for like 2 minutes. Or maybe for a day. Let's do it for a day. Grant's boys don't seem to be moving. Yeah, the commands could be streamlined. Agreed. All right, so Department of the West now has nothing. Look here. So Department of the West. Where's the Army of Mississippi here? So the Army of Mississippi, are these transfers final? They're still 1 day, 1 day, 1 day, 1 day, 1 day. So let's, I guess, wait for those transfers to finalize then. Oh, shit. There's an engagement. The Army of Tennessee is in contact with the Army of Eastern Louisiana. Shit, shit, shit. How do I get rid of this screen? Everything's locked in. I don't know anything about these armies. I guess we'll just jump into the battle and fight it. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for today's episode of Grand Tactician, the Civil War. I know that the battle hasn't really started yet. We only just covered about 20 minutes of sort of preparatory work. So we basically got the campaign underway and going. We're going to try and be aggressive as the Confederacy. I think in 1863, you don't have a lot of choice as the Confederacy. A slow defensive campaign might win politically, but I think going on the offensive is more interesting from a gameplay perspective, and also I think we have some unique opportunities if we're more aggressive than the Confederates were around Vicksburg or around Tennessee, perhaps. If we shift troops or figure out how to manage that, maybe we can be more successful than they were historically. And if we aren't, then we're not doing any worse than they did historically anyway. If they lose, they lose. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed this preamble, this beginning of the Confederate campaign of 1863. And until next time, guys, this is the Historical Gamer saying once again, thank you very much for watching. And until next time, I'm out.